Thank you, everybody, for spending some time with us today. This is part of our Hot Tech webinar series that we're going to be going over. Today, we're going to be covering cybersecurity, some current events that are going on, security in general, and also what VAI Cloud provides in security and how we secure people up. With that.
Fair is nice. Fair is a level playing field. Fair means everybody takes turns. But your world ain't fair. IT infrastructure doesn't wait for stragglers. To stay competitive, you need an unfair advantage. You need to supercharge your analytical insights. You need mission-critical reliability. You need to maximize your performance per dollar. In a world where everybody else is running standard infrastructure, your unfair advantage is IBM Power Systems. It's your path to harnessing the power of data. The unfair advantage that gives your business a competitive edge to define your destiny, to win. With IBM Power Systems, you can tackle the most demanding, data-intensive computing tasks on Earth. It's a platform of innovation, with an open server ecosystem that's revolutionizing the way IT is developed and delivered. You can make the enterprise private cloud simple. You can maximize your IT agility with the next level of efficiency, performance, and security. And with competitive costs, you can spend less on IT operations and achieve more. You can do all of this when you go beyond standard infrastructure. Your future is about changing the game. Your unfair advantage is IBM Power Systems.
All right. With that, I'll get to that in a minute as to why I showed that. But that is part of what we have in our cloud today, which is IBM Power Systems. It's the cornerstone of our platform. So, and in addition to that, I'm going to be going through some other aspects of what we do in the cloud. But that is a very important component. And with that, I guess from some of the things that we're going to come up here, this is the most recent reliability studies that has gone out on. This is from this year, back in July, from the standpoint of IBM Power Systems and their mainframe. They're pretty much in a class by themselves. The IBM mainframes deliver 9 nines of reliability, and IBM Power Systems deliver 8 nines of reliability. And with that, this leads into, I guess, the cybersecurity landscape today. It's everywhere. You're hearing about it all the time. The amounts of increases goes up exponentially every single year. Security and cybersecurity issues and attacks have been going on for many years, but the technology and the ability to access cyber malware is dramatically increased, which I'll cover that in a minute. This is just a couple of headlines that I picked up off of the news out there. The first one was actually our local county. It got hit with cybersecurity last year, actually, and there's still services that are not 100% back. So, and that is many times fairly common, depending on, whether it's a hospital or a government institution, or many of the smaller institutions that don't necessarily have the IT skills that larger corporations have. Another one in the news was Caesars got hit. They got hit with ransomware also, which took out a major portion of their VMware infrastructure, their Windows infrastructure. But I'll note, since most casinos run on IBM Power Systems in the world, nothing happened to their power systems. They actually stayed up and working in those systems, and the ability to track bets and gambling was still functional, while room reservations, security, and everything else that wasn't running on IBM Power, which was impacted. The same thing happened to MGM a few weeks later. Same situation from the standpoint of anything that wasn't running on IBM Power Systems, an IBM I operating system, which is the operating system that runs casinos in most parts of the world. All those systems were actually taken out. So MGM just went to their backups and restored and did not pay any ransomware, which is still the recommended thing to do, is to make sure you have good backups and you can rebuild from backups. When I mentioned the local county, that's what they ended up doing. They ended up going and not paying ransom, and their ransom wasn't actually all that much. There was a demand of $2.4 million. Caesars actually paid $15 million, which was half of what was asked. MGM just took a long time to rebuild their systems. This is just some of the common attack vectors that you have out there. First, public-facing applications, since you have anything that's facing the internet and is public, is obviously going to be the first thing attackers are going to attack. Whether or not you actually have cyber flaws or just misconfigured systems, which actually those two, and the misconfigured systems tend to be slightly higher than actually having security flaws in a lot of applications that are public-facing. But that's still a #1 attack vector because it's always available 24/7 unless you're shutting down your web operations or any of your public-facing operations at periods of time. Phishing is the next one. Spear phishing is usually targeted phishing, targeted people. It's becoming very sophisticated today as to how they target people, how they track people. And actually, in the case of MGM and Caesars, those attacks did not happen through any types of security flaws that they attacked. Those were social engineering attacks where they tracked the critical people, they spearphished and followed the important people that worked in IT operations and various other operations at those facilities, followed them on social media, found the people that were in charge of certain security systems and so on, and they, through social engineering and help desks, got passcodes through text messaging and multi-factor authentications modified to different numbers. So, and there was a couple of other techniques that they used, which also you might have noticed recently, Microsoft recently is now turned off the ability to do multi-factor authentication through emailing and text messaging and requires you to actually use their authenticator app because that reduces the footprint from somebody to be able to go through a social engineering attack on a help desk and have email addresses changed or phone numbers changed. But those were the two primary methods that were used in those two attacks. Going down the line, there's other methods of attacks, remote services, various different accounts, account management, and so on. I'm not going to go through all of them, but just be aware of them. As to common types of indirect, there's direct cyber crimes and there's indirect. The indirect would be, and I mentioned this earlier, there's ransomware as a service. No longer do you have to be a computer scientist to be an attacker or a hacker or someone who is ransomwaring and receiving millions of dollars from companies or institutions. You simply can pay somebody for that as a service. It could be a one-off payment. It could be a percentage of the take payment. There's various different payment plans that are on the dark internet. If you go onto the dark internet, you actually can shop for those types of attacks. And the people who are selling those attacks actually get the same types of ratings that you would see on an Amazon or any other website as to how good the transactions are, with stars next to them for software or attackware that actually performs well, and the buyer and the seller actually lives up to agreements. Yes, there is strange sounding that there actually is honor among thieves on the dark internet, but that's how they have to do business for people to come back and be repeat customers. Other means of cyber crimes is there's your phishing scams, which I mentioned. Whale phishing is targeted, typically to C-level people. You've probably read about them in the paper where, there was an automotive industry in Europe years back. The CEO and CFO got whale fished and sent $40 million to a ransomware attacker. So then there's spear phishing. Smishing is what you're seeing when you get these phony text messages and it wants you to click a link. That's SMS and phishing put together. There's other things that are done online that we're not necessarily going to go into today, but where people are the cyber crimes are stealing intellectual property, branding, squatting, so on and so forth, where you're pretending to be another website to capture information and so on. Then there's also online harassment, cyber stalking, which might require payments or things like that, meaning somebody gets photographs of someone famous or something like that, and they blackmail them for money, that type of online harassment or cyber stalking. Other types of crimes, the 0 days are the ones where there's no fix, which you hear about, and those are the ones you're hearing companies working really fast to get out fixes and updates. There's other types. There's double ransomware attacks where they're going to ask for payment up once so that you decrypt all of your data because they didn't take it with them, but they took a copy with them. So the second time they come back, they're saying, we have a copy of your data, pay us again. So then some of these others that you've probably heard, distributed denial of service, man in the middle, those are usually achieved nowadays by attacking the actual equipment manufacturers. There's a particular brand of equipment out there that's had a flaw in it since 2004. And by 2014, they finally shut the software down that had the flaw in it, but some of those flaws still exist. Then there's the various other ones, the traditional ones, password guessing, brute force, things like that, injection, those types of things that are being done. Countering it. As to countering, well, there's a concept called zero trust. You've probably heard the term thrown out there. There's presidential administration mandates for all the departments into the government to start instituting zero trust, which is assume somebody's already inside your network. You have to secure it from the edge, outside, and everything on the inside. So you should have just as much internal security on your internal-facing systems as if it's public-facing, even though it's internal-facing. That's done so that if somebody does get inside your system, they have to face additional layers of security to get past. And I'll show this later on. There's a method called the onion layer where you just keep layering security on top of security on top of security with different scan engines and different methods and different means of securing things so that if somebody gets through one layer, they won't get through other layers. Plus other things in IDS, IPS, your network designs, securing, updating all of your equipment, locking everything down, shutting down unused services. If you've got certain things running, that's running like, say, our analytics application, and you don't need the graphical interface running, you shut that down. You turn on all the internal firewalls on the equipment and so on. Also, access control, that's usually done at the application layer and identity management. Only give the level of permissions that somebody actually needs to do their jobs, and no more than that. And also, always have multiple copies of backup offsite storage, something that if something were to happen, you can go and recover from backup. There's various different means of doing that. Traditionally, it's been things like tape backup. Nowadays, it's more commonly using something similar to vaulting or continuous backup availability, not to be confused with high availability, which is not a data protection, that's a high availability component. All right, as to ongoing things that you need to do on a regular basis that should be part of your annual budget is internal, external penetration testing, vulnerability scanning. Those are point-in-time scans where you're doing it weekly, monthly, quarterly, semi-annually, annually, where at that point in time you're seeing what your security profile looks like. But that can change over time as you do updates, you update software, there's new operating system versions or software, other applications get updated, which could reintroduce flaws. So the latest level of security to deal with situations like that, which is relatively young, from around 2018 or so, is attack surface management scanning. That's active scanning constantly. There's services out there. We use one from IBM where it's constantly scanning everything. It's not just point in time. It's scanning all the time, and it sees anything that's added, new, changed, anything, and informs us of that. Other methods, the traditional event logging, log analysis, the ability to analyze your logs and look for potential security flaws and so on. Also, security awareness, social engineering. We have an external firm that does our pen testing and vulnerability scanning above and beyond what we already do. But also does security awareness, meaning how to deal with email, what's suspicious, what's not suspicious, what to look for. Same thing in text messaging or phone calls or any types of communications your employees might have with the outside world. Obviously, the desktop is always an attack vector, especially the number one attack vector is still always going to be Windows, just based on the sheer size and amount of machines out there. But those you're always going to need different levels of scanning. I mentioned some things here regarding email security services. We use additional email security services besides what Microsoft offers in their Office 365, even though we locked it down tight. There's some services that reside in their cloud that do additional above and beyond scanning. There's multiple different scan engines that we have at our firewall, at our email level, at our email service level, at our desktop level. So they're all different brands, they're all different scan engines that we mix and match, so it's making it harder and harder for anybody to try to actually get through anything. And that would be the common best practice method. I know some security vendors just say, buy our one product, it'll protect all of your equipment, but it's the same scan engine on desktop, on servers, on whatever other pieces of equipment you're trying to protect, mobile devices and so on. You're better off using multiple different scan engines. There's other things regarding email. I'm not going to go into the details of DMARC and DKIM, but those are things that are identifying that you are who you say you are when you're sending an email, and also from the standpoint when email is sent out saying it's you, the other person should be able to detect whether or not it is based on DMARC records. So they can see that somebody's spoofing you. So there's services that you can go to, or you can set it up yourself, that provide those services. DKIM would be to protect inbound, you're checking, DMARC is outbound. BIMI is something that hasn't really taken off, but that's a brand awareness where it's kind of like a digital certificate. Somebody's vetted you, and your emails actually get a certified, a logo on it that is copyrighted. And also, there's something new in the text world, very, very new, SMS 10 DLC. That's where anybody who does texting, businesses and things like that has to register. And they all have to be registered. This is an attempt to stop the smishing and the erroneous and malware type SMS messaging. It's very new. It's only some of the recent deadlines have just approached. If you're going through a service where you have text providing, like we have a Ring Central, so we can text through there, we had to go through 10 DLC registration. Also, your traditional desktop malware and malware protection. All right. As to VAI Cloud, we've designed, built our cloud utilizing security models and security employees from IBM and their lab service people. We have SOC and NOC monitoring to keep track of everything. We've hardened our infrastructure, shut down everything that's not needed. Anything that transverses inside our cloud is inspected by some piece of equipment. We do our scheduled pen testing and rollability testing that I mentioned, and we also do our attack surface management scanning. The product we use is IBM's Randuri, which is rated one of the best out there. And also, obviously, continuous software updating. We monitor all the CEVs and KEVs from the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, which I'll briefly mention in a moment. And we do have 24/7 monitoring and various different people monitoring also. We've designed with reliability and redundancy in our design. So we typically will have sometimes 2, 3, and 4 copies or pieces of equipment, just for depending on what we need to do. If we have to take down a pair of firewalls to update, we have another redundant pair there. So that's a situation where we might have 4. Other situations, we have 3. Obviously, we have multiple data centers in different states, so geographically dispersed. So that is by design and built into the design. Also, we have HA, and as I mentioned, data center redundancy. So the HA is to keep applications in sync, up to date, in real time. We use vaulting to back up everything. So each data center has a local vault. The local vault backs up to a master vault. The master vault backs up to a cloud vault. So we keep multiple copies so that anywhere along the way, if anything were to happen, we've got backups of the backups of the backups. So, and also from the standpoint, scan points to make sure what we're scanning and putting in the backups, at least initially, is a good, clean backup. Also, from the standpoint, you know, we keep track of everything. We're in the midst of upgrades. We pretty much are upgrading equipment throughout the year. So, you know, we just put in another order for another seven-figure amount of equipment that's going in next, so that we'll be deploying in the next few months. In addition to upgrading VAI's existing facilities that runs our business. I did mention before, there's a CISA advisor that we have from the Department of Homeland Security. That's a free service that they offer to anybody. If you have to track down your advisor, they're very busy, but you can get one advised. And the services they do offer, they're not as extensive as commercial services, but they do offer them no charge. As I mentioned Zero Trust earlier, we have our edge and we have our universal threat management at the very edge, and inside and outside it scans everything going in and out of our tunnels. And we can detect things that if something's happening on-premise at a customer's and block it from coming in, which it has done in a few instances where customers that are in our cloud got hit with ransomware. So they had to fix and recover their local network, but nothing happened to their ERP and S2K applications operations. They just had to make sure they had a secure method to connect, keep running their business. We do north, south, east, west security, which I have some diagrams that will explain that. That's the ingress and egress, in and out. We have intrusion detection and prevention scanning that's going on between the equipment. We've secured and hardened the hypervisors and the operating systems, and we lock down all of our applications. Although from the standpoint of platform as a service, if you're not sure if your S2K application is completely locked down, you can contact us for additional assistance in locking it down more securely. And obviously we keep tight controls on access control and identity management of everything that can be done in our cloud. And only in certain areas there might only be a handful of restricted people that can get to certain layers of management on back-end networks and so on and so forth. And as I mentioned too, our off-site storage. Some of the things that I mentioned previously, we use Fortinet's Universal Threat Management. That's the brand that's built into our external edge equipment. We use different brands of equipment internally, which is Juniper, which does some of the east-west and the routing between various different aspects of our cloud. We have daily advisories from CISA on the CEVs and the KEV security bulletins. We get daily reports from our Randori, or immediate reports of something that it's detected, as to any new change that needs to be made in a configuration or anything like that that's pertaining, because the Randori software also knows about the KEVs and CEVs that's fed into it, so it's looking for those also. So it's not like we have to manually always find these things ourselves. Executive Technology Group, that's the name of the company. It does our security scanning, pen testing, security awareness services, and training, and so on. Our software is HA through Rocket iCluster Software, and our vaulting is through a company we've done business for many, many years, OpenText. That's their vault, the vaulting and the local vaults and their cloud storage. As I said earlier, there's something called the onion approach to security, where you have to have security at the network layer, at the router layer, at the infrastructure layer, which is all in the network, and at the operating system layer, hardening of that. That also, it doesn't show it here, but that also would be under the operating system at the hypervisor layer, hardening those, and then obviously at the application layer. So if something gets through one layer, it'll be caught at the next layer if that would happen. Or vice versa, if in the case of a desktop computer through phishing or something like that, typically hits not from the network or the operating system layer, it hits from the application layer. It gets inside the operating system and works its way out. So that's the basis for zero trust. You don't know what direction it's going to be hit from. Brute force and some of the other attacks that come in through the network or through equipment like that, that might happen coming in. Other things like where equipment might be a brand of equipment. Somebody's attacking a particular brand of equipment. They're trying to put malware into equipment that's being delivered to data centers. That could be happening at the operating system or network layer. So all those things have to be looked at. And also to protect your data. There's protecting the network, there's protecting the applications, but obviously the most important thing is data protection. I mentioned the backups and everything else, but you have to make sure all layers of data, whether it's your application data or it's operating system related data, network data, all are protected properly. Because that's another means of attacking sometimes, is just hacking configuration files and so on at various different layers. And obviously, as I mentioned, I think in a report that came out about 2 months ago, misconfigured or equipment, or also, I guess the number one was somebody doing an installation of software and leaving the default configuration in place, not going back, turning things off, disabling things that are on by default that you're not going to need or use, but become attack vectors. So that's up there, number one. Also misconfigured, where you're not protecting, say, your HTTP headers on your web servers, or you're exposing what patch levels you're at, or things like that, to help attackers figure out, because they can fingerprint your entire website, and there's a lot of information they can get out of just fingerprinting your website as to what you're running, what operating system you're running, what version of a web server you're running, and so on. And obviously, you have to give it your best effort. You can't just say it's good enough. You've got to keep pushing harder and harder, trying to get better and better and better. Yesterday's better or last year's better is not going to be as good as next year's better. All right, and from the standpoint of PAD, that's what we do here. It's a similar diagram that we have here. The only difference also is you have control of the access and the application layer. So that is something yourselves, you got to make sure you're controlling who has access. Are you using, MFA to get to your network? Do you want to use MFA or single sign-on into our applications, which those are available things to do? And also, how is security enforced, between your users and password sharing and so on. And this goes back to other areas from the standpoint of security controls, that a lot of them are logical. And many of them are control flow related, and this is where I'll go into showing some of the diagrams of how things are controlled from the standpoint of security in our cloud and how it should be in your networks. Here, this is showing, from top-down firewalls, and we go through application distribution controllers, which actually are used in an additional layer of security and also for routing, and in lieu of software proxy servers, which can be compromised. It's physical hardware with its own acceleration and so on, redundant. Then it hits our Juniper stack layer, which has security enforcing, all various north, south, east, west security that I'll show you. And it does all the layers of security up and down the line and the analytics and reporting. This shows the inbound security model, north-south, which I'll get to in a minute. It controls everything that's coming in here. Here's all the policies, all the different things that it has to pass through when it's coming inbound. Whether it's web application firewalls, and it's the intrusion detection, intrusion prevention in there. Also, then it goes to the next layer, the distribution layer, which has its own layers of security, different policies there as to what can reach everything. And we do actually segregate our power systems from our Intel computing architecture so that everything that's communicating between the two has to actually go through equipment. There's no direct communication between the two. That adds an extra layer of security if anything were to happen. We do not have Windows in our environments. It's Linux on the Intel side, VMware, and it's Power VM and IBMI on the power system side, but that adds an extra layer of security. And obviously we monitor everything and look for all different types of unusual behavior and so on. This also is egress. We do the same thing when it's leaving and it's going into an IPsec tunnel. Of everything that's going into your tunnel, we're securing it in the same reverse direction, going through same types of filters and so on and so forth. Just make sure all of our customers are secure and everything else. And also that whatever they're accessing, they're allowed to access, and they're not trying to go through. We shut down all unused ports, so ports are only open based on what's needed. We're analyzing that type of traffic and so on. This is where I mentioned the north-south security happens at the edge layer. So it's got the web filters, ACLs, policies, filtering, universal threat management, all the other securities that you would be happening at an edge layer is happening. And this is the inside where it's everything that's communicating internally inside. Our cloud is all platform as a service. Each customer is isolated. It is not multi-tenant at the software layer. You have your own separate operating system instances in all situations, whether it's on the Linux side or the IBMI side, and nothing can breach across from one, as John Moyer would call it, apartments for our customers. So they're secured, so nothing can go back and forth between the two.